Good morning, and welcome to the Big Buzz Breakfast Club. We are so excited to have you join us today as we talk about the employee retention tax credit and whether or not your organization is leaving money on the table. My name is Melissa Legowski. I'm the founder, owner, and queen bee at Big Buzz Idea Group. And I'm going to just start with a couple of housekeeping tips this morning. Our session is being recorded. We will be sharing this information out with everybody post-event in case you want to reflect back, double check a fact or whatever. Please do put any questions as we go in the Q&A, and we will address those at the end once we've been able to go through the presentation in its entirety. And we do want to continue to make our information as accessible as possible. So you may control the closed captioning by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen to select disable if you'd like to turn off the closed captioning yourself. And just a little bit about Big Buzz Idea Group, for those of you who may not know us, we know that many nonprofit executives lack the time, staff, skills, and funding that they need. Big Buzz Idea Group fills gaps in management, marketing, and event services so that you can focus on the big picture and position your organization to thrive. We are honored and delighted to bring to you on a monthly basis the Big Buzz Breakfast Club. We really want to continue to bring information that allows nonprofit organizations to run like the businesses that they are and to achieve success in a lot of different areas. This morning, this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I'm super excited to be able to have Angie Knoll from Reconciled Solutions with us to help set the stage for just a little bit about how important I think this topic is. I have to kind of walk you through my own journey with this and how I found Angie and why she is the one that we've actually invited to present on this topic this morning. But I remember it was actually last fall, it was in November, right after kind of the third quarter had finished and our payroll taxes had gone in. It was a Friday afternoon and I was sitting at my desk and I received a check for $27,000. And I was absolutely dumbfounded as to why I was receiving this check. It was from the government. I didn't understand, like, how could I possibly be due this much money? Where would this come from? And with a little bit of digging, I found out that it was from the ERTC program. And I found out that my payroll company had automatically been set up to run the ERTC credit on the third quarter of 2021 for Big Buzz Idea Group. And so we were able to get that. And that then started me on this journey of, well, my gosh, what about all the other quarters? This actually applied to 2020 and this applied to, all of 2021. Was there additional revenue that I might be able to get? And as I continued to walk through this, I talked to another business owner who referred me to the company he had used. He's a very large employer, has hundreds of employees, and that company wanted to charge me $10,000 to just do the research to see if I even qualified for those other periods of time. And $10,000 to me was a ton of money. It was, if I didn't qualify, that was money out of my pocket after already being hard hit through the pandemic, because we do a lot of events and 50% of events were canceled. And so we were trying to kind of figure out, what do we do? And then I remembered Angie Knoll. I had seen her do another presentation during the PPP sessions, and she really had taken the time, the energy, and devoted all the time needed to become a bit of an expert on the PPP and the COVID fundings that were available. And so I reached out to her. She's a local business. She's somebody that I know through a couple of organizations that we're both part of. And I said, hey, are you by chance doing anything with the ERTC? And she's like, yes, for $99, we can do an assessment to determine if you qualify. And so I was just dumbfounded that one company would charge $10,000 and another would charge $99. And so I was, hands in, yes, let's do this. I want to see what I qualify for. Lo and behold, thanks to Angie and her team, Barat was phenomenal for us to work with. And we were able to receive from the IRS an additional amount that would actually allow us to hire a full-time employee. We got that much money back. And coming on the heels of the recession with all the losses, that was wonderful. So I quickly started realizing the need for more nonprofits to know about this, to know that they could qualify, to know that this program was available, to know that you could get so much money, up to $26,000 per employee that is a W-2 with you, even if you receive the PPP. And so I took one of our clients then to Angie and Barat. And I have to tell you, I was so impressed with the fact that we did the same initial assessment fee, low cost, review all the periods. And out of all the periods, they came back to us on our client and they told us it was going to cost us for a couple of periods more money to do the paperwork and the filings than what we would actually get back. So they weren't just trying to take the fees that they could from anybody. They were being an honest, trustworthy partner and telling us it actually was good for us to apply for this one period, but not these other two, because it just wasn't financially feasible because it wouldn't come back to us in a positive number. And so with that, I really wanted to continue to bring this information out to everybody. And I am super excited to be able to have Angie with us this morning to talk to you about this and what it might be able to do for your nonprofit organization if you have W-2 employees. And with that, Angie, I would love to turn the floor over to you.
Great. I'm so happy to be here. This is exciting. I see all kinds of participants, and I loved Melissa's story. I mean, that just makes my heart warm. And really, that's what we're trying to do at Reconciled Solutions, is just help people find clarity and visibility to their financials. The thing about being a small business owner or nonprofit is that it's hard, right? It's not that easy. And then there was this pandemic thing. It threw us all off. So when March of 2020 hit for my team, we're all just like everybody else, scrambling, trying to figure out what we're supposed to be doing, reaching at straws. And we saw our customers go to town, right? They were reaching out for anything that they could grab onto. So that really started with PPP loans, right? Everybody went and grabbed as much money as they could through the PPP loan. The EIDL loan was right in there. Some people were even lucky enough to get that first $3,000 up to $10,000 bonus of free money that didn't have to be paid back. And then as time passed in the pandemic, months went by and there was different grant programs that came out, and smaller municipalities and states were offering different programs as well for people to try to stay in business. One that really got overlooked is this ERTC credit, the Employee Tax Retention Credit. And that one really got overlooked because it's kind of confusing, right? It just wasn't straightforward like PPP. And honestly, we were up to our elbows in alligators. So we just didn't have time to think through all these things and figure out and do the reading ourselves to figure out if we qualify or not. So my company, we went to work when the pandemic hit, and we just wanted to, like everybody else, get people through this very difficult time. And we were really successful in doing that. I have to tell you, we helped about 50 clients in those first 9 months of pandemic. I would say between March and December of that year, we helped about 50 of the clients that were already our clients secure the funding that they needed. It was about $17 million that we secured for these small businesses. And these are small businesses, maybe annual revenues of up to 400,000 on the low end. And on the high end, we're dealing with businesses that maybe do about 20 million. So these are the smallest of businesses in the United States that are making a go of it. So to secure $17 million for this group was really powerful for us. And it enabled us to try to reach out and help more people find financial sustainability. So we're coming back around to talk about this ERTC credit. So one thing is the money's still out there. It's not going to be out there forever. I'm going to take a moment here to share my screen and start with my presentation. Okay. So the money's not going to be out there forever. I don't know when they're going to cut it off, but they will at some point say we're not going to allow these applications anymore. This other little thing happened since we made it through pandemic. It's called a recession. And so like, it's hard times, you know, we just roll our way out of the pandemic and all these difficult times, and we're getting to have our businesses reopen. And then this recession hits and, you know, we're back to these difficulties. So we really have to take advantage of what's available to us. And right now, this ERTC, it definitely makes sense to see if this is available to us. Cash is king in a recession. We really want to make sure that we have cash. So even if you're not like Melissa and looking to hire another employee or grow your team, just holding on to that cash. I mean, something we always recommend at Reconciled Solutions is 3 months of cash on hand. So if the world were to fall apart again, and if there was a COVID-23 or a COVID-24, that we would at least be able to run our businesses unfettered with no income for 3 months. So this is one of the ways that we can start to build that emergency fund. One other thing that came out of the pandemic is that there was a lot of predatory efforts to try to help people get this money. Melissa told her story, and I have seen it over and over again, where different companies are kind of robocalling and sending spammy emails asking for people if they are interested in checking out if they qualify for these ERC credits. And they're doing that for up to 15 to 30% of the credit amount. So that's some pretty serious cash. And what we decided at Reconciled Solutions is that we just want to help small businesses get their feet under them and get on solid ground. And to that end, we are offering our ERTC services for a flat fee. So no matter if you are able to gain $20,000 or $200,000, you're going to pay the same amount. We are offering it for a flat fee. So let's get to it and talk about what it is. Okay, so the credit is such that there's 2 ways to qualify. And the first is the most common. The first way that you can qualify is a decline in revenue. So on the screen here, I have a chart of the revenue requirements, and it shows that in year 2020, you have to be down by 50% in comparison to 2019. And if you are, you can get a potential tax credit of $5,000 per qualifying employee. Okay. In 2021, there's 3 quarters of options. So in the first quarter, second quarter, and third quarter of 2021, we are looking at qualifying revenue loss of 20%. So significantly less in terms of how much your business is down. We know that when the pandemic hit, it was just, you know, it was hell, honestly. So people were just losing tons of business at that time, but we pivoted and we're trying to come back, but we still know that it carried on into 2021. So that comparison for how much your revenue has to be down is 20% instead of 50%. And the government is allowing us to qualify for more per employee, up to $7,000 per employee. That's a W-2 employee. If you have only contract workers, then none of this applies. These are only qualifying for W-2 employees. Another thing I want to point out about this chart is that this is a comparison to 2019. It is not a comparison to 2020. So we're not lining up our quarterly revenue, comparing 2020 to 2021. We're actually comparing 2019 when it was a typical year for our business, right, in comparison to 2021. So that's a really important differentiation. And you only have to be down by 20%. So if you had an employee.
Angie, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. We've got a couple of questions coming in on some clarifying points before we move on.
Yeah.
So the first one is asking if this is gross revenue and what they would need to do to run those comparisons, if they would look at the P&L and look at a comparative gross revenue line, or what they would need to do. What is qualifying revenue? Is there any revenue that would not be included?
The only revenue that would not be included is if you got money from EIDL, or you got money from a grant, or from a PPP loan. So it's your actual revenue of sales, okay? And so we're just looking for your profit and loss, and we're looking for it quarter by quarter. Okay,
so a lot of these organizations are going to have their fundraising, any programs, membership, those normal course of revenue streams, and not any of the other support. That makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah, it's your normal revenue streams.
And then we have one other question too, is if the comparison should be on a calendar year or on a fiscal year basis as they're making this assessment.
This is based on the calendar year. So it's, January, February, March is quarter one, et cetera.
All right, perfect. You can continue. Thank you.
Okay. So we've gone through the chart, and you can see how much potential money there is to gain. $26,000 per employee is a lot. We do have to know our numbers, as you've already got some good questions about it. And I know that numbers can be overwhelming and confusing and make our blood pressure rise, but hey, I am here to tell you that it matters. The numbers matter. And the reason we were so successful at Reconciled Solutions and rolling this out with our current clients is because every one of our current clients really owned their numbers, knew their numbers, had taken the time to dig into them and understand them and educate themselves on their numbers. Because the folks that were kind of I do what I do and I'm not gonna pay attention to the numbers, those folks didn't necessarily qualify because they didn't have their shit together, right? You gotta have the financials in place so that you can compare and see if there is that revenue loss. So it's really, really important to have a good bookkeeper. And, that's my pitch for having a good bookkeeper, because if you don't own those numbers, nobody else is going to be looking out for you in your business. You have to own those numbers and know that there is a revenue loss or a revenue gain, or one product line is doing better than the other product line. All of these things are important things for you to be actionable business owners. So that's my little, soapbox for staying in business and staying on top of things, is getting to know those numbers. This is what's going to help your business survive in down times, and it's going to help your business thrive when the times are good. These are the things that we need to know. So I just want to encourage you to spend the money on a good bookkeeper and know your numbers. Super important. Okay, there's a second way you can qualify for this money, and that is if you had to close. Okay, so you can qualify for ERTC based on a reduced revenue or a partial or full shutdown. Okay, so let's think about restaurants, museums, retailers. We've had good luck in securing funds with those businesses that were required to shelter in place. One of the examples is the Elmhurst Art Museum here in Elmhurst. That's where we're located. And we were doing their books going in. They were required to shut down and they had to be closed for months. We were able to secure a really nice ERTC credit because they were not able to be open. I'm also on the board of Spirito Singers. My daughter's a singer, and that's a Western suburban choral group. And we couldn't practice. We had to move to online practices. It's hard to run a singing group on online practices on Zoom and get the sound right. So they qualified. So it's not necessarily only based on revenue. You can also qualify via full or partial shutdown. So a government order is needed to be provided with those applications. And the examples that I've given here is one, an order from the city's mayor stating that all non-essential businesses must close for a specified period. Two is a state's emergency proclamation that residents must shelter in place. Three is a curfew that impacts the operating hours of a trade or business. And the last is an order from a local health department mandating a workplace closure for cleaning and disinfecting. Okay. So
Angie,
those are some examples.
I want to jump in there too. I know that one of the things, right, for us personally at Big Buzz, I mean, again, 50% of our business was events, and events were not allowed to happen in the state of Illinois under the governor's orders. And so that really did kind of allow us to move into that space. I know there's a question in the Q&A right now asking about when the events were canceled, if that counts as a shutdown. And I just wanted to confirm that that does, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We do have to show proof that things were required to shut down.
Thank you.
Okay. Now think about this from the healthcare perspective. So healthcare workers are essential businesses. So that includes like your chiropractor or your physical therapist or your mental health therapist. All of those are essential businesses. They need to prove a reduced revenue to qualify for ERTC credits. So they can't necessarily do the partial or full shutdown because they were allowed to be open. They were essential services, but they can still qualify via reduced revenue. Because a lot of people stop going to their therapist and their chiropractor and this kind of stuff. So definitely qualifying via reduced revenue is the more popular of the two ways to receive the funding. Any other questions?
Not at this time.
All right. Okay, so there's no double dipping. So we got George Costanza here from Seinfeld reminding us that it's not a good thing to double dip. And it's very right. The government doesn't want to pay for other money that they've given you from other resources, right? So all these different programs came out when the pandemic hit, and we have to take into consideration those. The most prominent of those is the PPP forgiveness. So folks, I know that that little piece of paper that you sent to your banker to get your PPP forgiveness is hard to find, but you got to track that darn thing down because it does matter. We need to see how your PPP loan was utilized and if it was fully forgiven and how those monies were applied. So if you remember on the PPP forgiveness stuff, you could use up to, you could use 60%, you could use up to 100% on payroll. You didn't have to use anything claiming on rent and utilities. But you could claim up to 40% of your expenses on rent and utilities, and then claim 60% on your payroll expenses. For the most part, I think people just utilize the payroll side of that equation. They didn't necessarily pay attention to the rent and utilities part of it when they applied for PPP forgiveness. So that matters, because if you got $100,000 in PPP1 and you got another 100,000 in PPP2, and you applied it all to wages paid, then we're not going to be able to get ERTC credits against that money. That would be double dipping. Okay, so that's one of the ways that that we're considering double dipping. Some of the other ways is you can't have a family member as your employee. So I employ my 2 kids in the business, and their wages are not subject to ERTC credit. Okay, and that applies for spouses and things of this nature. So there's that. There's this work opportunity tax credit. If you took advantage of any of those, there was some paid family leave credit. And then there was federal grants, such as the shuttered venue, the restaurant revitalization, or relief for transportation services. So those were all some of the different programs that were out there and people could claim money against. And with all of those, if you claimed that money, it doesn't mean you don't qualify for the ERC credits, but what it does mean is that we have to measure it and make sure that no money is getting used twice. There's no double dipping allowed. Is there any questions on that?
There's not, Angie, but we did have one follow-up to the 2 ways that you can qualify. And somebody is asking if there's any point in starting to even run the numbers for revenue loss if they were closed by the government shutdown. Is it one or the other? Does it matter? Like, you know, if they already were shut down, do they even have to run the numbers?
They might not even have to run the numbers. No, I would say that it's easier just to put the application through, because you're absolutely closed from being open.
Okay, and then we have another question that's just come in too. If the qualification on revenue, how is it cash or accrual basis?
So it's cash or accrual basis. It doesn't matter which one you're on. You need to let us know when you're doing the $99 assessment if you're on cash or accrual, because it will impact our calculations. But it doesn't matter as far as qualifying if you're on cash or accrual.
Thank you so much.
And then, I just wanted to make a note about partial shutdown. So for partial shutdown, I just wanted to bring up, like, restaurants and retailers were doing all this curbside pickup and stuff like this, but you couldn't dine in or you couldn't go in the store. So that would be in the partial shutdown area. Okay, so that is a consideration for potential credit. Okay. All right. So what happens next is that we have a form. It's at reconciledsolutions.net with the /ERTC. And you can go there and fill that out. You'll have to pay the $99 non-refundable assessment. And then once you do that, once you make the payment, then we send you this survey, and it's filled with a bunch of difficult questions. Not necessarily difficult. If you're a QuickBooks Online user, we love you. And you can just send us access to your QuickBooks Online, and we will be able to pull the reports that we need from your QuickBooks Online ourselves. If you're a QuickBooks Desktop user, Xero, any one of these other softwares, Sage, then for those folks, we're going to need you to send in the quarterly profit and loss for 2019 and all through 2020 and 2021. Okay, so we would need those quarterly profit and losses. And additionally, we're going to need, if you got that PPP forgiveness, then we're going to need that forgiveness application, because that's the one that shows how much of your PPP was based on forgiveness of payroll costs already. So, you need to fill out this survey, and it might take you a bit of time, but we have people here available that can answer your questions and try to get you the information. Okay, so once we crunch those numbers and see if the credit is available to you, then we're going to let you know. And you're going to know, yeah, as Melissa brought up, we did one where it just didn't make sense for the company to file because they weren't gonna gain money financially, because it was going to cost them just as much to file as what they were going to gain. So know that if we say, yeah, it makes sense to file, then yeah, it makes sense to file. Okay, I will tell you that the average refund that we've done about 40 of them. And we've seen refunds from about $20,000 on the lowest end on up to about 300,000. So there's money to be gained. You're only going to spend up to $3,700 with reconciled solutions. That is the most that we're going to be able to charge you, because we are doing this on a flat fee. So that means if you got $20,000, you're going to spend $3,700 to receive it. If you got $300,000, you're going to spend $3,700 to receive it. So we want to make it worth your while. It just goes back to trying to get our small businesses on strong footing in this difficult economic time. Okay, so
Angie, I'd like to pop in. We do have a question, and I want to kind of clarify to this point and help somebody kind of see this too from the same lens on the pricing. So yes, the cost is $99 to see if you qualify. It's the best $99 I've ever spent for myself or the nonprofits we serve. And then the question is about the $5.99 for you to fill out the form. And that $5.99, I want to stress, is per period. But if you remember that chart that Angie shared at the beginning, so for all of 2020, it's one form. And so if you qualify for that if you have one single W-2 employee and you were to pay that $5.99, you could get $5,000 back on that, just to put this in context. But each one of those periods is a different form that they have to complete. So it is $5.99 per period, right, Angie?
It is $5.99 per form. So one slight correction to what Melissa said is that the most you can gain in 2020 is $5,000 per employee, but there's actually 3 quarters in 2020. So in 2020, there could be 3 forms for quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. And then going into 2021, you've got quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3. So it's up to 6 forms. Now, for the most part, what I've seen happening is that 2020, people went and got those PPP loans. They got them quickly. They applied it to their payroll cost. So for the most part, we apply that PPP loan forgiveness amount to the first and second and third quarters of 2020. And maybe by the 4th quarter, all your PPP money was used up and you'd still qualify for this ERTC credit in the 4th quarter of 2020. But that's what our comparison $99 assessment fee is going to tell us. So what I will tell you is it is up to 6 forms. So $5.99 times 6, and then plus the $99, the most you're going to spend is $3,700.
Thank you for confirming. And then another question. By double dipping, do you mean PPP funds for payroll will be deducted from any qualifying funds available through ERTC?
Yep, you got that exactly right. So I'll say that again. You said it beautifully, which is by double dipping, it means that your PPP funds that were forgiven will be deducted from any qualifying credits on the ERTC.
Thank you so much, Angie.
Okay, so you fill out that questionnaire with all the forms that are hard to find. And you send that all to us. And then we're going to look at that information. We're going to get back to you and tell you, yeah, this looks good. We're going to go ahead. We want to go ahead and file. And so what we will do from that point is we would tell you what quarters that we're going to give you the calculations for. And then we would provide you with the spreadsheet and all the calculations. Then it's your job to take that spreadsheet and all those calculations and turn it over to somebody who does a 941X. So a 941 is what we file every quarter that tells the government, the US government, how much we have paid in payroll to our employees, okay? So a 941X is a revised document that shows per quarter what the company paid to employees. So the 941X is what triggers the ERTC credit. And so that form has to be filed. Now, a lot of companies have a payroll provider. So your payroll provider might file this for you, okay? A lot of companies have their CPA file their quarterly payroll taxes. So your CPA might file that 941X. If you're in either of those boats, then what you would do and what you get from Reconciled Solutions is all the calculations for that preparer to go ahead and file that 941X. It doesn't mean you're not going to be charged from your preparer to file that 941X, okay? But it does mean that they have all the work done for them. So I wouldn't be reaching out and paying 15 to 30% to the preparer to file that 941X. That's a ripoff because we've already done all the calculations for you. So you would check first with your payroll provider or your CPA who does your payroll taxes and see what they're going to charge you for that. And if they're going to require that you're going to do one of these percentage of gain contracts, then we've already partnered with Andrew Balderson and Company. That's a local Chicagoland tax preparer, and he has agreed to file those 941Xs with our calculations for $250 per form. So I'm really excited to be able to offer that because there can be a bit of an argument there when we do all the calculations and then you hand it to your payroll provider and they want 30%, that's a little messy. So we want to be able to have an option for you to be able to get this money into your bank account quickly and easily and cost effectively. So that's what the step is on 941Xs. Then once that 941X has been filed, it's only been taking about 3 weeks to receive the money from the government. And it just appears in your mailbox as Melissa received hers. Just one day you get this beautiful check in your mail and you're like, woo, party time. It's good stuff. We've seen that it has taken longer for the people that applied earlier. I don't know like what happened there. So there is the wild hair where it's taken like 6 to 9 months to get that money back. We have seen that as well. And I cannot promise that the money will be there in 3 weeks, but lately it's been trending about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks.
And I will jump in there too. And I know we got our 2021 acknowledgement very quickly. The 2020 is actually hanging out there in limbo somewhere. So it can be a little mixed bag as well. And I really think too, one of the things that I want to stress, and the reason we brought Angie in, who's really focused on this, is that, there's been so much learning. And so when I think about the nonprofit community that we serve, I know a lot of people use your local accountants. You may have a local resource that you work with in your community, who does your tax filings and all of that stuff. And sometimes they just haven't been able to keep up with all the regulations if they're a small shop. And that's why some of these larger institutions have been out there kind of, I think, really overly taking advantage of a program like this. And that's why we felt it was important to bring in someone like Angie, who's credible, who I personally have worked with, know how trustworthy she is, because I think in the nonprofit community, we just want to make sure you're keeping as many of your dollars in your pocket as you possibly can. So these are all fabulous resources. And I know for us, we use Gusto. Gusto completely did all of our filings for us. It was really super easy. Bharat had access to our account temporarily. He was able to do what needed done, and boom, it just went beautifully. For our client that we're working with, they've gone through some changes. During the pandemic, they had a W-2 employee, and then they let that employee actually kind of resign during the pandemic. And then they moved into the management model, where we're actually now their office support. And so they no longer have an accounting firm that they're working with. There's a whole lot of things in flux. And so for them, this Balderson and company then became a good option, because it just starts to make a lot of sense for this resource to then go ahead and have access to the additional dollars. So it's really a case-by-case basis, but they walk you through every single option at Reconciled Solutions, which is just another advantage of this partnership. We do have another question, Angie, about what exactly is a qualifying employee. Can you cover or clarify that?
Well, the only thing that they can't have done is get one of those grants or file for the some of those credits, like the Family Leave Act. Yeah, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, the Paid Family Leave Act, or the family member stuff. Okay, so those are the big ones. There's a couple other smaller ones that weren't used as much, but qualifying wages, and what the government is allowing us to do is to pay up to 50% of qualifying wages paid. So let's say you have a $60,000 a year salaried employee, that's $5,000 a month. And so in the first 3 quarters, that's 9 times 5. So they were paid $45,000 in the first 3 quarters of 2021. And you could qualify then for up to 70% of those wages.
Thank you so much. And no, we have a question about if you have to be a nonprofit to use Reconciled Solutions. So they do for-profit businesses as well as nonprofits. It's simply that I know that a lot of our nonprofit community that we service, they really struggled with being able to have some of the programs be available to them. And so they were at a disadvantage, especially during the pandemic, a lot of our 501c6s in particular. And so really making sure that they know about all of the resources and programs. I feel like this one kind of came through in the CARES Act and people threw around the acronym, but then, kind of to Angie's point, you see that, oh, if you claim payroll wages, then, on the PPP, this doesn't apply. And so I immediately thought I wasn't eligible, but, then the PPP only covered part of the wages. And so there was still a lot of wages that did qualify. We have another question about, if people wanted to do their own comparisons, kind of wanting a little bit more information. And I really feel like that's not necessarily something we can cover in this brief time today. There's a lot of nuances to this, which is part of the reason why we wanted to be able to connect you with somebody who's done the research, done the time, who can make those assessments. I think that if you, you know, we can't kind of do a broad sweep of like, do this and you qualify, do this and you don't. There's a lot of nuances to this program. And that's one of the reasons that I think somebody like Angie and Bharat have just become such an incredible resource, because they've been doing this day in and day out now for at least a year.
Yeah, there are a lot of small print here, and that's why people did not take advantage of it as much as they could have, because there's so many small print things. So we do need to, to get your calculation right, we do need to do that assessment.
Thank you. And if people do have any other questions, please continue to put them in the Q&A.
I have a little bonus for you guys. So if you think you're in a position to get money back, we are in that recession period, and I really want to see businesses hang on to their cash. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that Treasury bonds right now, US Treasury bonds, they are yielding 9.62% interest. So where a savings account is gaining money at like 0.3%, the Treasury bonds right now purchased through the US government, you get 9.62% return on your investment, guaranteed. So that's just pretty fabulous. There is a $10,000 limit per person. You can only invest $10,000. But I just wanted to put it out there in case somebody has an extra $10,000 laying around. I mean, 9.62%, it does not get better than that. And we really want to hang on to our cash at this time.
Angie, how long do those Treasury bonds have to stay? Does the money have to stay there to mature? Is it?
Well, they
fluid?
pay the interest every 6 months. So it's kind of like, you don't want to take it out before 6 months. And then they're going to continue to pay on the 6-month basis. But they're only available for sale at 9.62% through October 31st. So if you do want to take advantage of that, you got to move quickly on it.
Wow. And is that the same as an I bond? Somebody is asking.
Yeah, that is the same as an I bond. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you.
I have a website for that. I can put it up in the chat.
Thank you. And are there any other questions at this time today? I think we've been able to cover a lot of them as we went, which was really great. And I will say, somebody is asking about how the refund came to me, and it really was just a check. And then actually, once we had filed our payroll adjustments, yeah, I mean they're just checks. They're checks from the IRS, so it's just a check in an envelope. That first one took me a minute, but then, the others, at least I knew I was expecting, so that helped a lot.
Okay, and I put 2 things up in the chat. The first is the Treasury Direct link, if you want to do that $10,000 I bond. And the second is the website where you fill out the application for the $99 assessment.
All right, perfect. And we will, as I mentioned before, we will be sending out this recording following the presentation once it's available for us to download from Zoom. And then we will include these resources in that email again as well, just to make sure that you have all of this available. And so, somebody's asking what the process is to get started on our own. And I do regret that that's really not what our webinar was about today. But Angie, I don't know if you have any guidance for how somebody could do this on their own.
Well, you just have to do the comparisons. And then you'd have to file the 941X.
So excellent. All right, good. Well, Angie, thank you so much for being with us today. I hope that our participants have been able to take away a lot of valuable information, and you can now review if you qualify. And I really hope at the end of the day that in this 1 hour that you've spent with us, that there's going to be some nice revenue coming back to your organization. And I hope it will continue to help you thrive and survive as we are still recovering from the last few years. Have a great day.
I do have one other thing I
Oh.
want to add, Melissa.
Okay.
And that's just, I don't know if we have any chambers of commerce here listening today,
We
but
do.
this is really great for your membership. So if you want my information, you can definitely reach out. And we can share that with your membership. So I do think there's just a ton of small businesses, both for-profit and nonprofit, that have not taken advantage of this. And if you want your membership to be aware of this program that we're offering through Reconciled Solutions, be happy to connect.
Thanks, Angie. And with that, I hope that everybody has a wonderful day, and I hope that this brings some revenue back to you. Thank you.